Hi everyone. Today we are going to talk about something that's becoming increasingly critical for HR leaders, and that is verification. As data privacy expectations grow, workforce models evolve, and AI agents enter the equation, organizations are being pushed to rethink how they validate people, credentials, and information. Verification ceases to be a back-end task anymore. It's directly linked to trust, compliance, and how organizations stay future ready. And to help us unpack where this space is headed, we have with us Kartik Mandaville, CEO and founder of Springworks. Kartik, great to have you with us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here.
Wonderful, wonderful, Kartik. So, right off the bat, Kartik, let's start with the bigger picture. Kartik, verification's always been tied to compliance, right? Do you think that's changing now? That's one. And especially with AI stepping in, how is this becoming more of a trust building lever for HR?
Sure. That's a great question. I think, over the last 20 years, compliance used to be doing security, HR compliances, labor law compliances. Now it's slowly, moving away to HRs, and HRs are leading, BGV in most of the companies we talk to, right? And that's across the world, not just India. And now HR has an even more important play. HR is not just for humans, but also looking at AI agents and whatnot, right? So background verification and overall verification is becoming more crucial. While people are doing a tiered BGV right from the interview, because interviews are not happening in person anymore, they're happening offline, they're happening over internet, whatnot. Then something at after offer, something at the time of joining, every time there's an address change, every time there's a designation change. So it's becoming a tiered BGV where companies and HRs are running this entire process, because it's all related to the way we work and the way HR processes are set up, right? From recruiting to onboarding to designation to promotion and whatnot, right? So I think it's becoming because background verification, verification in general has many of the things have become easier with kind of AI coming in with removing the friction of candidates. So candidates are not too worried. Oh, I have to upload a 10-page form, right? Like I'm sure a lot of us, would have filled paper forms for, visas and, all of that, right? Now everything is digitized. It's not just digitized to an extent where you have to type it, but where you can just take pictures and it does the job for you, right? So we've reached that stage already.
Okay, that's wonderful to know. I can understand how AI has really streamlined verification and has also reframed it, as a strategic enabler of trust, given in a digital first workplace. That brings me to the next question, Kartik. So there's a lot of talk about agility in hiring, right?
Sure.
Saying gig roles, flexible models, even in skill-based work. So that also puts a lot of pressure on how we verify people, right? So how
Hmm.
can HR keep things watertight without really slowing down the experience?
Sure. So, gig workers in the different types of roles, which is not just a full-time employment. What has happened is earlier for like a contractual role or an internship role or a gig worker, you would do the same amount of verification, and that'd be both cost prohibitive and time prohibitive as well. So now, because you can do these tiered background verifications based on the tenure as well, right? Even though a gig worker, maybe is doing a contractual role, but after 6 months, they've kind of now moved to a more full-time role. Then you can probably add in more layers of verification, right? So now, given the initial building blocks are there of doing verification, either it's an ID, criminal, education, employment, drug test, whatnot. HRs are able to kind of plug and play, right? It has become like a workflow builder. You kind of decide what do you want, when do you want, based on your own internal compliance rules and business, policies, and not it's like not one size fits all where you just, oh, this is the only verification I could do and this has to work for everyone across the company. Now you, based on the role, based on the tenure, based on the seniority, you would do the level of verification increases, right? Depends. Sometimes if you are in a finance role, you may want to do a credit check, right? For example, like that. So it is becoming very specific to the person doing the job.
Right, right. And as you said, I think one size fits all approach is really outdated now, right? And that's a really crucial point. Also, frictionless verification, could actually become a real differentiator in competitive talent markets as well. So, also now, say
Sure.
privacy is a really loaded space now, Karthik, right? With rules
Right.
varying across regions. So, what's your take on how HR can actually keep verifications compliant globally, and where do you see AI helping here? Without say crossing any boundaries per se.
Sure, sure. So, even in India now with the DPDP Act, which is, around similar to the California CCPA and, GDPR, privacy is a big thing where, each employee has the right to see their, report. They can have the right to delete, whatnot. Traditionally in India, background verification has been, limited to the HR, and only the HR will have access to what's, really happening. And sometimes the person does not even get a chance to kind of say, oh, this report is actually wrong because this is not me, this is someone else with the same name, or this case was squashed, right? For there are obviously reasons and false cases and whatnot. So now I think slowly the conversation is changing where people have more power in their hands, right? We are moving up away from an employer driven world to an employee driven world, where people are able to kind of see what data is being asked, why is it being asked, how is it going to be used, and then what is the final result, right? Maybe not all companies have adopted to that system, and once kind of there is mass adoption, people are able to see, then you can actually say, please expunge this from my record, right? Like in the US, you cannot go beyond 7 years for a criminal record, right? As in, by law, that's not allowed. We don't have anything as of now, like this in India. But I think more and more companies, modern age companies, are saying, "Oh yeah, I don't really care if this person has committed a a driving offense 10 years ago, right?" So there is, I think that kind of new philosophy is coming up. And finally, there is a concept of re-verification. You join a company, 3 years later you join some other company, you everything starts from zero again, right? Everything gets re-verified. It's a lot of effort for you, for the company, for the background verification company, right? So everyone kind of ends up spending a lot of time. But I think we are hopefully over time with DigiLocker and the new there is a talk about doing an ONDC framework by the government, for similar to UPI, and having something like that for professional verifications as well. So once the kind of the initial infrastructure is set up, the people will have, everyone will have their kind of their own profile, can take it with them. So the re-verification does not need to happen, right? Whatever has been verified once can be just used without really getting to it again and again.
Okay, that's super helpful, Karthik. Especially, it was a pretty interesting lens which you had on re-verification as well. So, again, a lot of verification processes, right? They still sit in
Hmm.
silos. HR is doing their own thing, IT is doing their another thing. Risk somewhere else. So, what would it essentially take to break that and sort of build something which is more connected, right? Maybe even in real time.
Sure, sure. So generally, right now, HR is taking the lead here. Other departments or stakeholders are be giving requirements to the HR, and this is what we're looking for. Can you help us draft a policy around this and whatnot? So verification is becoming this thing controlled by HRs or run by HRs. In other words, and then other IT departments and business leaders are able to put in policies, right? Take Swiggy as an example. They would have their driver partners and they would have employees, right? Both of them need verification, even though the driver partners would generally be managed by the operations team, but the verifications would generally be done decide centrally by the HR team, right? So that's how I think those conversations are happening. So AI is kind of helping HRs decide these workflows and make it modular enough, right? And more than AI, it's mostly technology. AI is just an enabler, right, at this point. But HRs are able to have a say and kind of say, okay, this is how we are looking for it centrally. It's better for the entire organization to act as one. We work with one or two vendors and have redundancies and whatnot, right? So I think the our HR softwares itself are also becoming robust or flexible, where you can have multiple type of roles and not just one role, right? So I think that has kind of changed in the last 4 or 5 years after the gig economy has taken off, right? Because many of these companies have both types of roles, right? Where they have employees and they have gig workers, and sometimes they even have freelancers and contractors in other parts of the world, right? So that's also there.
Right, right. That's pretty helpful, Karthik. So also it also highlights, I think, the future of how the future of verification, does not like essentially does it lie in cross-functional orchestration then? Because I think you just mentioned, that HR is taking care of verification, and it's not just an isolated upgrade, right?
Correct,
So,
correct.
yeah, correct. So, lastly, Karthik, I wanted to ask you, if you had to call
Mm,
out one breakthrough, whether it's
mm.
AI driven or not, that could completely shift gears, that could completely shift how we handle verification and data security, what would
Sure,
that be? And again, how can HR get ahead of it now?
sure. Sure. So, my as a breakthrough which I would personally want is, someone like a DigiLocker, authority type of thing, which kind of actually streamlines a lot of these verifications, which don't need to happen again and again, right? So I think something like that, what the government has done for Aadhaar would be great to have for other types of documents. And I think but coming to your question, where what can HRs do today to kind of stay ahead of the curve is, really focus on the candidate experience. We've seen candidates, if they don't like the background verification process, or they're not kind of told of what is, this for, why is it being asked, they would actually drop out and ghost the company, right? So it's becoming really important, the candidate experience. And think of like a tiered BGV. Just don't do, something because you've been told. I think if it's part of your ISO SOC 2 audit, it's always good to have a conversation with the auditor. Why is this check required? Why is this verification required? Do we need to do this level of verification for an entry level person? Things like that, right? You can kind of there's no rule anywhere which says, okay, these are all the things which need to be done. At the end of the day, it's a business decision which is taken by compliance, HR, and the management.
Right, right. I think that's a really compelling lens, Karthik, on what's a clear signal, that HR must be ready to lead this adoption curve. So that brings us to the end of this really brief but very thought-provoking conversation, Karthik. Thanks so much. I think what's really clear from this conversation is that verification is actually essentially becoming a foundation, of how organizations are enabling trust, how they are ensuring security, and how they are, staying future ready, right? And of course,
Correct.
HR has a pivotal role to play here, in shaping this ecosystem, one decision, one data point at a time. So thank you so
Yes.
much for joining us today, Karthik. It was wonderful having you.